Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. I'm back and I've got a bit of a story to tell, so don't go away. Hey guys and girls, it's great to be back. We have so much to catch up on and so much to share. So in this video, I want to give you, my loyal subscribers, a bit of an update on what's been going on and also introduce some upcoming videos on my experience so far with the DJI Mini 3, the Insta360 One X2 camera, the DJI microphone setup, and a few other gadgets. So there's plenty of content to come on all of those things, but first, a sincere apology, an even more sincere thank you, and an explanation. So through 2020 and 2021, going into early 2022, I spent an incredible amount of time and energy building my YouTube channel, from a very small base of subscribers to well over 15,000. And since then, even though I haven't been active, my content has continued to be enjoyed and helped to inform people, and the channel has now reached over 20,000 subscribers. Along the way, I've gotten to know through emails and comments and feedback an awesome group of people that have continued to support me and the channel. To those people especially, and also to new subscribers over the last year, I sincerely apologize for not creating and publishing the content you've grown to expect and enjoy from my channel. That's why you signed up, right? Because you get value or entertainment from the information that I was putting out, and then it stopped. Faster than a new version of, I don't know, anything by Microsoft needing to be patched. Now, I'll explain why shortly, but whatever the reason, the fact is there hasn't been a day that's gone by that I haven't thought about it. And so to my loyal and new subscribers, I'm sorry, I've let you down. I've also had numerous comments on my last couple of videos from people asking where I was, why I wasn't uploading, was I okay, what was going on. Now, I've done my utmost best to keep up with answering as many of those comments as possible, and I prided myself on answering every single comment or question I ever received, but sadly I've not been able to keep that up either. As for a thank you, it's to you, the people watching this video now, the people who have stuck by me and this channel, who still want to hear from me, who still wonder, where's Mike? The people who clicked on this video are unlikely to be the ones looking for drone tips or reviews on cameras or lighting or other gadgets. No. They're the ones who saw the thumbnail announcing to the YouTube world that I'm back, and actually gave a damn big enough to click on it and see what I had to say. So to you, thanks. Now, it was honestly not my intention to drop off the radar for quite so long. I did signal in my last video that I'd be absent for a little while, maybe a number of months, but not even I thought it would be this long. In actual fact, other than one rushed effort in the middle of last year when I threw my brand spanking new DJI Mini 3 off the balcony of a 28th floor Shanghai apartment building and expecting it to hover like the Mini 2 used to, only to my horror seeing it plummet down towards the concrete below. Link to that debacle in the description below. So now, the explanation, the story I've been wanting to tell so many of you for so long. Now, I could honestly make a 2-hour video telling you everything, but for the purposes of this update, I'll just stick to the highlights. Now, in late 2019, myself and my family were preparing to move from Auckland, New Zealand to Shanghai, China, early in the 2020 new year. I've been seconded to a role in our Shanghai office for a couple of years. So, massive adventure, a great chance for the whole family to experience a completely different culture, see more of the world, and all of that good stuff. By late January of 2020, we'd either sold or given away or thrown out virtually everything we had, furniture, appliances, everything, and kept in storage only a small amount of things that were either sentimental or couldn't be replaced on our return to New Zealand. We'd rented the house out and moved into temporary accommodation with literally just over a week to go before we got on that plane to China. All we had were just a few suitcases. And then this happened.
China has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation where there is not a cause for alarm.
The first US case has been detected.
There's confirmation the coronavirus has reached Australia.
China is urging its citizens not to travel abroad as it struggles to contain the virus.
We will be standing up Christmas Island as a quarantine area.
Foreign nationals coming from China are now banned from entering the country.
At first we thought we might be delayed by a week, which then turned into a couple of weeks. No problem. But borders were shutting, restrictions were being imposed, 2 weeks turned into a month, and then maybe we thought we could go next month. When it became apparent it could be several months, we scrambled to find more temporary accommodation. But as we had nothing but our suitcases, we needed something furnished, and let's just say in New Zealand that either doesn't come easy or doesn't come cheap. We also had to get the kids back into some sort of schooling, and that's just another whole story in itself. New Zealand then went into a total lockdown.
I cannot repeat this enough. Staying at home will save lives.
We're really hoping that actually people have heard the messages and understand how horrendous this could get.
The signs were up and doors shut in Auckland too. The police were out as well with last-minute advice for stores during the shutdown.
1 month turned into 2, turned into 3, and before we knew it, we were halfway through the year with no clear path as to when we could leave to go to China. Our visas expired. Chinese consulate was shut down due to the lockdown and not issuing any new visas due to China's borders being shut. Then we found a place we could use for 6 months, which gave us both some ability to settle and some time to plan. So fast forward a year and we were still stuck in New Zealand. In that first year, because of the lack of suitable accommodation, we shifted 7 times. Yep. That took us into early 2021, when there was some hope that perhaps after Chinese New Year, the borders would open and we could get new visas and get going. Through some official channels, we had a ray of hope that things were looking up. And then
there's growing global alarm over Omicron, the new coronavirus variant.
Omicron has moved quickly. Now countries around the world are racing to get ahead of it. As quickly as the travel restrictions were announced, they are more likely to slow down rather than completely stop the spread of Omicron.
The door that was looking like it might open shut pretty fast. Our accommodation term ran out and we had to move again. Then New Zealand had another lockdown in Auckland where we were living, and still there was no real end in sight. Fast forward to the end of the year and restrictions were starting to be slowly lifted. Whilst many parts of the world were opening up and essentially learning to live with COVID in late 2021, New Zealand still had among the toughest rules of almost any country. Now, people were sick of it. They were sick of the on and off lockdowns, and many protests and rule breaking started to happen. However, China's borders, meanwhile, were still shut. Roll on into 2022 and nothing much had changed. But then in February of 22, we got word that we may have a short window to get ourselves visas and clearance to move, but it had to be relatively fast. So, long story short, we did all that, we got visas, eventually we packed up, said goodbye to everyone, again. And finally, on the 5th of March 2022, we were on our way to start our adventure over 2 years later than originally planned. So much for sticking to the highlights. But that's just the background to finally getting to China. When we landed in Shanghai, almost a day of processing and waiting at the airport, we were finally transported to a quarantine hotel. The family was split up. We didn't know that was going to happen. Myself and my son in one room and my wife and daughter in another, somewhere else in the isolation hotel. And that's the last we saw of each other for 3 weeks. We couldn't leave the room, otherwise our time would start again. Food was delivered 3 times daily, temperature checks twice a day, and COVID PCR tests every other day. Staff dressed in white suits would spray the corridors a couple of times a day. The TV was 100% Chinese, so we never watched it, and the windows were screwed shut. Other than that, it was pretty much like a bad holiday. Now, after isolation, when we finally got out, we moved into a temporary apartment to enable us to do things like apply for residency, get my work permit, get the kids started at school, find an apartment to live. So there was quite a bit to do. But 3 days later, this happened.
COVID lockdown, Shanghai style. 26 million people by some measures the biggest city in the world, confined to their homes. But breaking through the silence, drone instructions.
For a few weeks, food was pretty hard to come by. You probably saw it in the news.
There have been desperate complaints of shortages of food, water and medicines, overburdened delivery networks, and growing protests.
The government sent out food parcels occasionally, and I remember one day us all dancing around the table in the apartment because we'd just been delivered a plastic bag with some eggs, some pork, and a variety of vegetables, most of which we didn't know what they were or how to cook them. We were allowed out once a day to walk a 2-kilometre round trip to line up and get a COVID test and then isolate back in the apartment. The kids started their new school online, not knowing anyone, how things worked, or what to do. Oh, and then we caught COVID. My daughter was the first to get it. We can only imagine by catching it at a testing station. Then we all got it. The police turned up one afternoon to take us to a quarantine camp. Yep, like the ones you probably saw on the news.
Nationwide Tuesday, China reporting more than 100 new cases for a 7th day in a row. That's the biggest jump since March. A Shanghai sports stadium has been converted into a vaccination site as China ramps up inoculations.
Frantic phone calls for help brought us some time to pack our bags, and they said they'd come back. But by that night, no one had. We all slept on our clothes for 3 days, living out of suitcases on the floor of our apartment because they could have turned up at any time without warning. Now by that stage, the rest of the family were testing negative on antigen tests. They eventually came back a couple of days later and tested me, still positive. After a lot of back and forth, it was decided that either we all go to a quarantine camp or just me. Just been taken from my room, come through the back corridors of the hotel, now just waiting for the transport to arrive and take me to my my new home for hopefully not too long. Here's my ride.
didn't bring a pillow now. And I saw how small the pillow is. Like Gracie told me, oh, don't bring a pillow, stop bringing a box. Oh, Shama.
It wasn't so bad. I mean, another foreigner, an Australian guy on the bus, we stuck together in the camp. He had some antigen tests, so when we got into camp, we tried him. I was negative. Now, you needed 2 negative COVID tests to be able to leave, not antigen tests. You needed the ones that they did. So I asked for a test. Nope, not today, they said. Probably not tomorrow either. 2 days later, 5:30 a.m, they woke us up with loud hailers to line up for a test. The next day, I got told it was negative. I had to wait another day for a second test and then another day for the result before being allowed to get out the day after. Camp wasn't so bad. The beds were certainly not a Western heavenly bed. The lights stayed on 24/7. I think they're afraid of the Squid Game scenario if the lights went out. When you arrived, they gave you this bag of bits and pieces, including a roll of little rubbish bags. Everyone used those rubbish bags to make rope and then used blankets to make a little hut so you could sleep. That is until 5:30 a.m. when they woke you up with a loudhailer. So for those of you who've ever been on school camps with your kids, it actually reminded me a lot of those. Cold showers, if you're lucky enough to get one. Average food, not much sleep. When I was able to go back to the apartment we were living in, there was still another 2 months of lockdown to go. When that ended, it was a mad scramble to get visas renewed because they'd expired during the lockdown. Then apply for residency, work permit, find somewhere permanent to live. Also, the school terms were quite different versus New Zealand, so the school year here was just finishing, which meant the kids went on a summer break. But because they'd started the school year late and missed out on schooling in New Zealand because of the lockdowns, they spent a large part of the holidays working, trying to catch up. There was also still quite a few restrictions in place, so moving around was a bit of a challenge. Lots of COVID protocols, scanning everywhere to get into buildings, public transport, that sort of thing. So getting anything done just seemed to take longer. The last part of 2022, we'd found an apartment, so we spent time getting moved in, getting settled. The kids could start school properly, as in on campus for the first time, and I could get into the office to do my job actually in person. There were still lockdowns, localised, where you could have a building in a compound lockdown or sometimes an entire compound for anything from a few days to a week. And then protests started happening because people, they just had enough. And so by the end of the year, the government really didn't have much of a choice but to start lifting restrictions. Of course, COVID swept through the country at a crazy speed in January.
The abrupt dismantling of the Chinese government's zero COVID policy, many people have been anxious about China opening up to the rest of the world.
This hospital in China's Sichuan province pushed to the brink. COVID patients here now triaged.
Pretty much in 3 weeks, it had gone right through the majority of the population. In the previous month, where a positive case would prompt a localised lockdown, now you're just encouraged to stay at home for 5 days. Such a change. The streets in the metro were super quiet and it reminded me a lot of the main lockdown. Then in late January, pretty much all the other restrictions were lifted, and by early Feb, it had almost gone back to pre-COVID times. Very normal life. However, it was the first time since we've been here that life could be anywhere near normal. So it's really only now that we've been properly out and about, properly settled, and starting to get on with normal life, almost a year to the day since we arrived. So that, in a nutshell, a rather large nutshell, I admit, is the bulk of the reason why I haven't been producing any content. It's not that I haven't wanted about it, hell, I've been thinking, dreaming about it every other day. It's just that I had a few other things to deal with. During all that though, I was able to get a few gadgets, the new DJI Mini 3 Pro, the Insta360 One X2, and a couple of other things. So there are videos coming pretty soon on my thoughts and my take on those devices, my experience on using them in a very different environment to what I've used similar devices in the past, so stay tuned to those videos. Life is still pretty busy and different, so I apologise in advance. It'll be a little bit longer between drinks, but please bear with me. Speaking of the Mini 3, check out my only video of last year where I learnt the hard way about not fully understanding a device's capability before throwing it off a high-rise apartment building. hey, thanks once again for hanging in there, team. If you have any questions about my move to China and want more separate videos on that stuff, let me know in the comments section below. See you soon. Zaijian.